of you are. The JazzWORMS are Andy Weyl, Keith Oxman, Paul Romaine, Ron Miles, and Mark Simon. And they have a new album that's coming out, I believe, on March 19th on Capri Records. It's called Squirmin. And we actually have Tom Burns here from Capri. And I thought it would be a nice way to start things off, maybe to hear Tom talk a little bit about the new record. So I'd like to hand it over to you, Tom.
Oh gosh. Well, how about questions?
Sorry, I mean, just how did this come about? And if you could talk about your involvement and maybe the process of recording this new album.
Sure. I mean, we were all friends back in the 80s, and I used to go hear these guys as often as possible when they did their first record, not on my label, by the way. I helped with promotion. I helped book them once or twice, and I just wanted to do another record with them because it didn't seem like James, the guy with the label, was going to do it. And Ron left the band for a while, and Tony Klotka came in, and then it kind of just disbanded. So this all is over 30 years ago. So I've been kind of quietly prodding at them to try and get them to do another record. And finally I get a call from Ron, and he said, "Tom, it's time." So I called all the other guys. I said, "Let's get this thing done." And thanks to Colin Bricker at Mighty Fine Audio at our recording studio, it did. And these guys really did everything. I had very little to do with it, honestly. I just, maybe it was a catalyst or something like that. But the magic when these guys get together is indescribable, honestly. Brilliant.
Who came up with the title Squirmin?
So, well, that's funny. I mean, we were all batting it around, and I remember saying to Paul, "How about Squirmin?" And he said, "Nah." And then he calls me the next day. He says, "You know, Ariane suggested we do Squirmin for a title." So anyway, it was kind of funny. But
well, we were talking about, we still had that. Originally, the title was going to be like, the first album was Moving Around, or no, it was Crawling Out. It was, the first album was Crawling Out, and we wanted this one to be like, the next album was going to be Moving Around. And then if there was another album, but that'd be like 30 years from now, so we'd be really old. Like I'd be like 91. But anyway, that album would be called, Getting Kind of Hard, and then the last one would be Drying Up. The life cycle of a worm, Basically.
Oh, I don't know, man. I honestly think that we should go with the next one not being 30 years from now, but being fairly soon from now, and we should call it On the Hook. On the Hook.
There's just so many wormy things you can do. But,
exactly.
But we were talking about like squirming around. What else do worms do? Squirming around or squirming, and then just leaving the around off, and then it ended up squirming, which is kind of like steaming or cooking or relaxing or moaning. It's and what a title for our times. Like, I think we're all been squirming a little bit.
Maybe we're now off the hook as opposed to on the hook.
Tom, I'd love to hear a little bit about, when you first met these guys, and maybe what the scene was like then, and how you guys all got connected in the first place.
Well, I was awfully old back then, but yeah. I've met all these guys in different ways. Keith and I actually met at a wedding in the 70s. And then we met again in 78 at a Sonny Rollins concert at Regis, an All-Stars concert, honestly. It was McCoy Tyner, and an amazing concert. And I have a whole lot of stories about that concert. But so Keith and I became friends, and I met Mark and Paul. I'm not sure exactly how that was, but I worked with them a lot. And Andy worked a lot with Spike Robinson, who is one of the first artists on the label. So, and then the band formed, and I'd see them more frequently. So, but no, these were the cats, man. Back in the 90s, we had the old guard, which Spike was one of, Ron Washington. I mean, it's a long list of guys that were just amazing. Milt Cannon and Homer Brown and Billy Wallace. And I mean, I could go on forever, what I call the old guard here. But these guys were coming up, and they were kind of making everybody turn their heads, because they're playing stuff, I think, ahead of its time, honestly. They were coming up with structural ideas that, especially Ron blows my mind with the things he comes up with. Always has. But first hearing Ron's band around that same time, and it was a little more eclectic, but my God, it was just breathtaking to hear. So, but we all became friends, right, guys?
Oh yeah.
Well, that kind of leads me to one thing I wanted to ask, and I'd like to invite the Worms to jump in on this too. If you could
Please.
talk about how the scene has changed in Denver since when you guys were first starting up as a band. If you could maybe compare.
But basically, we had a lot of clubs in Denver in the 80s. I mean, Nick and Polly's, you had the Union, what was it, Union Station or something like that. You had, what was that place on Logan and 10th or whatever it was?
BBC.
Anyway,
Well,
BBC,
Spirits.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there was Spirits. So there was just a lot of clubs. I mean, the lounge at the Burnsley Hotel, all over. And earlier there was Senate Lounge, and there was a place on Colfax in Ogden that was a hotel.
Beowulf.
And there was a Beowulf in Cherry Creek, yeah. So it was really a lively scene. And in the 90s, things seemed to kind of wind down. And it's just been kind of these little surges here and there. But yeah, I just think the scene now, especially with COVID, I mean, no one can go out. But even before that, you know, Dazzle and Nocturne kind of pulled forward as the classy clubs. And there's still a lot of little places to play, but it wasn't like it was back then, honestly. It just wasn't. Anything you guys want to add to that? I'm shut up now.
Well, I have a that Jazz Elite Network magazine that was very short lived, but there's a calendar in there, and I think there's about 60 clubs listed.
Yeah.
From that period of time, and that wasn't all of them, but that was all clubs that had live music, all that had some jazz during the week at least, you know, and they were all, people were playing, you know, like we were talking about that a couple weeks ago, what the climate was like when we came up, and how, like you said, the old guard, you know, was willing and able and so generous with their spirit and time to pass this art form down to us and tolerate whatever we were up to, like our little feisty kind of young whippersnapper attitudes that we pull out every once in a while. I mean, I remember Mark Simon and I chewing bubble gum, like, and popping bubbles and bugging Spike and Ellen in that quiet Burnsley Hotel thing. But it's really the only way we could stay awake. Anyway, I'm gonna.
By the way, I just found those tapes. So
With the bubble popping?
I don't remember the bubble popping, but I recorded all those concerts because we were going to put that out on a CD.
He would incorporate the bubbles and, you know, trading fours and stuff.
Oh, I'll have to listen to it when I play them back. But
Find the bubbles.
I just had Park transfer them to digital. But, you know, we were going to do a CD, Spike and Ellen CD, and Spike was so ticked off at these guys because they were just messing with them. They just like to mess with Spike, I guess. No, lay off the pots and pans and give me about an 8-bar bass walk or something like that. So.
Make it bass.
Do, 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 do. That was a Latin intro.
A ding, a ding, ding, a ding, a ding, ding.
He would look at you and go, goo 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 gee gee goo.
That's it.
Goo gee 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 gee.
And also, Mark, listen, you got the first Boston, okay?
Yeah, he says, you know, Jeanette Macdonald played the baritone saxophone on this one behind Nelson Eddy. So, this is a nice old dude. Yeah. Anyway. But these guys were like the rhythm section for almost everybody came into town in one form or another. Some of them were at the Pack or whatever.
It's cool for me as someone who's, you know, coming up in the Denver scene now to hear about what it was like. And I also feel like I have that mentorship that Paul was speaking to. So I appreciate that that still exists in Denver. And I think that's kind of a very central part of Denver's jazz scene is, you know, the older musicians supporting the younger musicians. So it's cool to hear that that was similar for you as well. I kind of want to segue talking more about the album and hear about the Worms, each of your different compositional processes. If maybe you could talk about what you think of when you're sitting down to write a new tune, or maybe if it's different, if you're writing like specifically for the Worms, or if you have a tune that sort of finds its way to the band. Could you guys talk about how you write for the band?
Well, you should do it alphabetically by the name of the band.
Okay, we're gonna
Andy?
start with Andy then. We're gonna go by Worms.
Well, yes, in terms of, did I write for the Worms? Primarily, yes. And I would try to make songs that were, let's say, challenging, or things that they would like to play. So I also would sort of try, if I had a problem myself, or there was something that I was exploring, I might write a piece that had something in it that was challenging to me. So some kind of chord substitution, or some kind of a different voicing, or something of that nature. But I also sometimes found something in someone else's work that I would use just to build on. That is to say, just something like a minor second thing that, say, Dolphy did, or like one of the most recent things on this new record. I kept getting stuck with this. I've been listening a lot to this particular Jim Hall, Paul Desmond stuff, and there was a rhythm in there, and I just kind of used that. But it's at a different tempo, and you would probably know it unless you heard me tell you about it. So there was that. But also, if somebody in the band, for instance, Mark Miller was in the band for a minute there, and he played soprano. So I wrote one song, well, he's soprano, so let's get him to play soprano. So I wrote where his part was a soprano. Oh, he's an alto flute player. I'm going to write a song where there's an alto flute. So I know that starts below C, it's down G, below C, middle C. And so I wrote that. So yes, in terms of the stuff that I wrote that the Worms played was all written for Worms, specifically for Worms.
What about you, Keith?
I don't think I'm as scientific, and writing has always been a struggle for me. And actually this group helped me a lot with that, because they were writing all the time, but Tom also got on me about that, that I got to do more of this. And for me, I just felt like I was stabbing in the dark all the time. I didn't, never felt that confident about my writing. I still struggle with it. And I experimented with writing chords first, but I think mostly I try to come up with some sort of melodic thing and then figure out what I'm doing from there. And sometimes the harmonies, if there are harmonies, they get added later, but I'm not a sophisticated writer by any means. And sometimes it's hard to sit down and actually get at that. I wish I had more to say, but it's just a shooting in the dark thing for me.
I think that's cool though. It's fun to hear about everyone's process, So would you say the Worms, you said that's what encouraged you to get more into writing?
Well, at first, because they were we had rehearsals once or twice a week, and these guys, Ron was coming with, entire volumes of stuff. All these guys were writing all the time. And so I thought, well, I better try to do something. And then when I wasn't in the group, once we kind of went our separate ways, I sort of didn't do it because I was never that drawn to it. And then later I did my first recording for Tom's label, and Tom says, you got to have a couple of originals on here. And it's like I did not particularly want to do that, but he impressed upon me that was a really important thing. So that he got me into it later. And I'm doing it now. I'm writing, especially during the pandemic, I've written a lot. It's something that's, it's not like playing the horn, practicing saxophone for me.
Cool. It's cool to hear about people's processes. Ron, could you speak to your writing process and maybe Worms specifically?
I don't have a song on this record. And I think it's I just didn't have anything that seemed to fit. And when Tom and I talked about doing this, I mean, I remember even saying like the world needs to hear more Andy Weyl music. And so I love everybody's writing so much that I had a song that I thought would work, but it just wasn't ready. And there was lots of music. So I'm just happy to play these great compositions because like I say, everybody has such a unique voice and a special voice that I'm just happy to be a part on this one. So thank you.
Well, definitely Rainbow Sign was one of my top 2020 albums. So it was cool. If you guys missed it, we actually did an interview with Ron back in, I think it was November. And we'll be posting that so you guys can check that out if you missed it. Who's next in the Worms? Oh, I skipped Paul. I went Wom instead of Worm. All right, Paul.
That's okay, man.
The Wommers.
Yeah. No R. The Woms. Well, wow. I was thinking about this earlier and how I do this. And for me, I always seem to be inspired by something in my environment to get me going. And we were talking about that a little bit 2 weeks ago. And Andy, I forgot all about the windshield wiper bass line, like the wind and the 66 Bel Air. And there's a couple tunes that those windshield wipers inspired during that period. I wrote another tune that was just an homage to a brief relationship I had, and she lived in Omaha, and it was raining on the way home, and the windshield wipers were doing this wham 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 wham. So that became like the melody, and I was just starting to, and I kind of had from Omaha to Denver to sing a melody. So, or just to kind of come up with some lyrics. I was just kind of making stuff up, and that was writing from a lyrical perspective, and I was just using these windshield wipers, and this is what's going on in my life right now. If we listen to like man, the first album was so different, and there was certain grooves that I really liked and certain things I wanted to do and things I played in other bands that, like, well, like when we did Crawling Out on the first album was just like, I wanted to do that sort of, what's that?
Juicy Lucy, right?
That sack of woe kind of groove, boop,
there's that, yeah, right.
And I think,
last
and there's so many, the last tune of the year is the bridge to Juicy Lucy. Yeah. And that came about because I think at the time, like, you hadn't played that tune very much, Andy, and we were hanging out on New Year's.
Yes.
Like New
last
Year's
tune
Eve
of the year
at your house, up to all sorts of shenanigans. And we were talking, and the conversation, we were going to try to write a tune together. I think that was that's a co-written tune.
Yeah. I have a little part.
I think that's the tune, Paul. I think that's the tune that we played in that Perry Mason scene, and then they edited out something else in, like with clarinet or something. Yeah,
it's something that sounded like Moonglow.
Yeah.
It sounded like, and we're just so
Raymond Burr mess up his lines. Remember that?
Yeah. So Andy and Keith and I, along with Mark Diamond, were in a Perry Mason episode, and I think there's video. Some people still have that on tape. I never recorded it, but I
It's
think
on,
these
it's
guys,
on DV, it's on DVD, but when they replayed it on TV, they edited us out.
they took out that scene. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, but the DVD, it's in there.
So and we developed a whole technique of playing from that because they didn't want to hear us play, but they wanted to look like we were playing. So we developed this Perry Mason quartet kind of way of playing where, you know, like I had the stick in my hand, but I was hitting it with my finger. So it looked like I was hitting it with a stick and the cymbal was moving, but you know, there was no sound. And it was just trying to make it look like you were. And every once in a while, like Andy and Mark Diamond and I, the Big Swing Trio, we would just like, we'd be in a room like full of people that weren't listening and we're just like wallpaper music anyway. So, you know, we would just say PMQ, which means Perry Mason Quartet. And all of a sudden we just pretend we were playing and, you know, and people would just keep talking and, you know, just drop out for like 16 bars or a whole chorus. We'd play a whole chorus that way, you know, like just there'd be no sound, but the band would be playing. So, but anyway, we got away from how I write. So, but it seems to always be inspired by something, some encounter. Like I just really feel like it's not like I practice it all the time, but I'm always trying to learn about harmony and melody and different ways of using things. And I get real, I'm so far behind, you know, theory wise, like I know what it is and I know what it sounds like, but you know, like in terms of writing it and making sense and using all the right, you know, and harmonics with chord symbols and all, you know, people in this band are very forgiving of that kind of stuff that comes from me. You know, they're just there to play the music and they don't care if I, you know, called a C sharp, a D flat or whatever, you know, they're just going to play what's on, you know, they're going to play it and they're going to hear it and it's going to feel good. So knowing that I have that kind of outlet where, you know, I'm not, there's no judgment. There's never been any judgment about anything that anybody ever wrote in this band, you know, and we all played it with equal amounts of, you know, enthusiasm, excitement and passion. So this last couple tunes that I wrote on this new album were both inspired by my pet birds. Oh, she's downstairs. I was going to just grab. So I have an African gray parrot and a cockatiel, and the African gray parrot's name is Boo, and we like I was teaching Brazilian stuff all day in my studio at CU, and I was doing this thing. It was, you know, yeah, like that kind of thing where, yeah, let's see. Anyway, so, and then I got, you know, Boo is kind of sitting on her box. She has this kind of jazz apple box that she hangs out and there's all these papers in there and she tears them up. But she was sitting there and she kind of looked like, hey, what are you doing? And so I grabbed a couple of paper rolls, like empty, like aluminum foil rolls, you know, kind of like I had just a couple of those laying around the house for some reason and started playing on her box. And then Boo was just like checking it out. And it's like, man. And I knew that we had to write this out. This album was coming up. And honestly, I wrote that tune, you know, less than 24 hours before we rehearsed it. And like from the time it got written to the time it was recorded was like less than 3 days. It was just happened, you know? And it was like, but I think about groove and contrast. You know, I really like stuff that has different kind of parts like to it, and you know, like written versus ensemble, or ensemble versus improvised. And lately I've been kind of relying on the improvisational skills of my peers and just writing very little melodic material, but it's enough that brings things together. And then and then just kind of like free blowing, but in a way that's kind of interactive. So that's been kind of fun to play with that a little bit. There's some of that on this album on like Booze Boxes like that. Just like sections of improvised, trading kind of stuff. And I know that it's going to be good because it's these guys. So it's like, why have to, like, I just sometimes just know it's going to be swinging, and we're all going to be swinging, and I don't have to do too much to make that happen. I just rather rely on the decades of skill that these guys have and their intuition, to bring out whatever that music's going to be. So I kind of do that a lot. I built a lot of the melody of like the other tune I wrote, like, which is based off the cockatiel. His name is Donnie, but he Boo came from a house. We adopted Boo, the parrot, about 15 years ago, and she came from a house that had a cockatiel in it, and the cockatiel's name was Sweetie. And Boo has a tendency to impose her persona or her ego on other people. So if she likes you, she'll put a boo at the end. So she called that bird Sweetie Boo, Sweetie Boo, And so we thought, well, this would be kind of a, new bird, new home, but there's a cockatiel. Why don't we just start calling Donnie Sweetie Boo to give her some kind of continuity? And it kind of ended up sounding, after years of her doing that, she kind of dropped the S, and it kind of sounded like Weedy Boo, Weedy Boo. and and then there's this little kissing thing that Donnie does, like, so that's all in that tune. I just put all that just stuff from, I just like putting things from life in music, and usually I'm not happy unless I laugh, unless I can laugh at it. So, because I know, like, not everybody writes that way. So if I'm in a band and I write a bunch of stuff that I think is funny, not everybody's going to write that way, but it'll be a relief to get to that tune, hopefully, after playing all this serious stuff, it's like, oh, here's one you can't dance to anyway. So, yeah, I think that's kind of like, I just really listen to what's going on around me, and there's music. Like, I went to a Sean Jones thing one time. He was just talking about, there's music everywhere. You just have to listen, and it's overwhelming, the amount of music there is to be written. You just have to listen. Just open up your ears. It's amazing. So that's kind of like my approach.
It's cool. It's so cool to hear everybody's different approaches, and I think you can hear all the eclectic things coming together, and that's what makes it so special. Mark, could we hear about your process?
Well, we could. I just get off on maybe a phrase or something, and it has to do with, I'll write from different instruments. Like the first tune on this particular album, it's called Launching Pad, and I came up with like a pedal tone on the bass, and then I put like triads going from major to minor, moving down, and then down a half step, and so I just kind of came up with this little line on the bass, and then I came up with that little harmony, and then I started thinking about what kind of scale would fit. So my stuff's maybe a little more theoretical, but I started thinking what kind of scale would fit over this crazy A pedal with a E flat to E flat major triad to an E flat minor triad, and then a D major triad to a D minor triad. What scale would incorporate all the notes that are in that particular, the A in the bass and also the two triads? And I came up with this kind of odd scale that I really started to like. And that's what the melody on that tune got based on, and then the whole idea was in the title was a launching pad. Let's like start the tune with this line, and then this groove will just be happening right away. And of course, Paul just, laid it down with that funky brush groove that he does. And I actually wanted to add a little name to the end of that tune, Worms in Space. Launching pad, in parentheses, Worms in Space, but I thought that's probably too long. So, and that, like Paul said, you just depend on your players, and they all just like picked up on it and played it brilliantly, I must say. And the next time we play it, it's not going to sound anything like that, obviously. And that's what I like about this particular tune and the kind of the form of it, is that you can, it's just like a launching pad. Here's a line, now go, everybody just go. And then here's another line that'll take, and then there's a short little bridge that I do. And it just kind of develops. Now, the more I play it, the more I think about it, it just kind of turns into an actual composition. And that one particularly is kind of odd for me because I'm a little more specific about what I write, melodically. And, there's room for improv, but a lot of times, it's really based on a chord progression. But on this thing, it was just kind of a free for all. Here's a blast off. Let's go. Worms in Space. Do whatever you guys want to do. Do it.
Do you think we should listen to a minute of it?
Oh, sure, if you want.
A little bit?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
One of the weirder things I've ever written. But
I love it.
thank you. But one thing about that is, I suggested a scale for it to be based on because of the melody, but obviously play whatever you hear, so. But it's kind of, it has a little Middle Eastern flavor to it too, which is, a little bit part of my heritage. So anyway, so that kind of entered into it in a kind of natural, organic way, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool to hear about all of your different approaches because we got so many different answers, and it's cool that so much diversity and diverse influences all come together and just create this magic. It's awesome.
The other tune I wrote on guitar, and I was playing a tune by Freddie Hubbard called SKG or SKJ. It's just a B flat blues based on a pentatonic scale. How does SKJ go? But anyway, I was playing this melody. It's a repetitive blues thing, and then I just started playing it in a bunch of different places, and that's how that other tune came about. Is actually from the melody, and then I just tried to make it pretty. So that's about it. It's kind of what that one's called. What If All.
Cool.
A completely different way of, for me on this album anyway, two completely different ways of writing a tune.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, are you guys gonna, once COVID's over, are you guys gonna play some cool release show or something? Maybe take it on tour? What's the plan?
Well, yeah, there's an offer on the table. I've just been trying to get everybody to respond. There's something like that Dazzle wants to put. They want to do like a release thing in March. I think we're doing that. But
yeah, we'll all be in a different corner of the room.
Yeah, well, of course. I think we'd probably do it from Mighty Fine.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So we would be doing it.
The
would be
best approach.
Yeah. So that would be a nice. I think that was the last time we played together was in the studio, so it'd be nice to kind of reconvene and play again in there.
Absolutely.
Why don't you guys come over to my house and play?
Well, then there's the porch scene too. That's wide open this summer. Worms.
Porch tour of Denver.
Get some worms on the porch. If you want some worms on your porch,
Yeah,
let us know.
but Tom's going to get us gigs in Japan, right?
Yeah, baby, yeah.
I think there's some porches in Japan.
Osaka.
Speaking of playing live, what's your guys' philosophy, like, or your relationship with your audience? Are you thinking about entertaining all the time? Are you thinking about how you guys, what's your relationship with the audience as a band, maybe individually? Any thoughts?
It's funny. Like, have we ever had a conversation as a band, like, about? I mean, this is I know what our roots are, but I think, my philosophy has kind of evolved as such. But I don't know if we've ever, like, as a band, like, thought about or addressed that question. Somebody jump in if I'm wrong, or if somebody wants to just answer that question.
I always felt, I was sort of wondering if we started a gig with a full audience, how many of them would be there when we finished?
I will remind you about Bluewood Springs, okay?
That's the one I'm particularly, we were left with a few barking dogs on that one, I believe.
And we were
also,
banned from that festival ever again because of the dogs.
also-
Or I think dogs were banned. I think the worms were banned, and then the dogs were banned. Ron was doing this thing on his trumpet, and all the dogs were just going nuts.
Remember that tech center gig that we did?
well, there was that too.
We got fired after like the first or second tune.
No, first set. We made it through the first set.
Oh, did
I have
we?
a recording of it.
That's
Yeah.
on video, you guys.
Remember the guy came up to Ron and me and he said, just pack up, we're done.
Yeah. So, I mean, I
have
guess our
that on
philosophy
DVD
was
about
toward the
that.
audience in the beginning. It seems like, well, you hired us. This is your problem.
Did we play Westcliff? Did Worms play Westcliff?
Yes, we did.
And I think we did okay there. I think,
Great there. They loved us.
yeah, that was a success.
What was that? Was that 86?
Either 86 or 87
They were
or
drinking.
88.
I think somebody told the story 2 weeks ago, but about when we were playing at the Peck, and Jerry took us back to the office. That story. And then Ron said, let's just play what we do. What should we do? How to keep the gig? And Ron just said, let's play what we do. And so that to me is like the attitude we have.
I mean,
with the audience.
Ornette, think of Ornette. I mean,
The
I'm not
audience
saying
liked it.
that we're in the same kind of category as Ornette Coleman, but, just how much opposition he had. And also how even Bird, I mean, even bebop was, frowned on by a lot of people who I respect very, very much. And similarly, Ornette, a lot of people that I respect very much, including Miles, by the way, who just couldn't see it. They just couldn't see it. So we should just keep going with what we were doing, because, sooner or later people would catch up to it. I hope. At least that's how I look at the stuff that I write, is I hope that people will appreciate it at some point. Maybe not while I'm alive, but maybe, I don't know. Ron is luckily, man, they caught up with you, my friend. So, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. So that's all I got to say.
What was the gentleman's name who was who worked with James? He was like a lawyer guy.
Lee Benton.
Lee Benton, yeah.
Lee Benton.
And he, I don't know that I've actually even told everybody this story, but we took this really seriously, and he was not a fan of us taking chances, really, because he gave a good lesson, whether it was intended or not. And he took me back one time and said that, you need to think about this. And he said, these other guys don't live in their mama's basement, and they got families and they got stuff to do. So are you playing around? Are you serious? And I said, I'm serious. But it made me think about it, a lot. Just, that we're taking a stand, but we didn't not want, we wanted people to like it. I mean, we liked the music. It's not like we were going to be, you know, to go against what people want, but we just had to do what we heard and what we felt. I mean, this music is too hard to play if you're thinking about what you should do or what you ought to do. You just got to do what you can do, because it's happening fast. You know, you're reacting to what's around you and the energy of the audience, the energy of your bandmates. But we were serious about it, and we still are. You know, so it was a great lesson, like I say, to contemplate that.
And I will also say we did have some great successes. I remember playing, I mean, granted, it wasn't a huge venue, and I think I even have a video of that at the Penny Lane in Boulder on Pearl Street there on East Pearl. And we had a packed crowd, and there were 5 of us, and we were dependent on the door. That gig did not pay. And we each made like $130 or something. I mean, people dug it, man. And so, you know, and we did have a following, even if Paul doesn't seem to remember that. I mean, there were people that came out to hear us at Nick and Polly's, or we wouldn't have been able to keep working there, because it's still about making money. It's a club after all. So, yeah, you know, and that was good. That gave us a little reinforcement, I think, for us to keep doing what we were doing. You know, if we'd been just hated the whole time, you know, we would have just said, forget it, this music, it's just not working or something.
Well, the thing about Jerry and the Peck was, and Ron saying, let's do what we do, the place happened to be packed when he came back there. So to just to emphasize your point, people liked it. You just had, and we did get a following. We started to be able to draw a crowd. So Jerry didn't like it. That's all.
Well, he ended up just staying home on the nights we
Yeah,
played.
Right.
Like
Well,
Paul
good,
said, that
fine.
Story where people would call him, he'd tell them, don't come. You know.
Well, the other thing about that gig was that we were sharing the set with James.
Right.
It wasn't all Worms all the time.
Yeah,
So
then we come up and
no
do
matter
it.
what we did, there was going to be there was blues to be played and listened to, and an equalizer musically that would, you know, level the, you know, get the crowd. If they weren't on their side, they would be by the end of the set, you know, like, because we're like, it's just play a blues, and all of a sudden you know, it's kind of something I learned on the porch this summer was, you know, like my formula on the Please Stay Away porch was 4 tunes and a blues. And it didn't matter what you played, but people just be so happy by the time that blues came around. They'd be dancing, they'd be running up with money, throwing it in the box, you know, and just dancing in the street. And it was just so I like that from an audience. I like to have the audience respond and interact and love what they're hearing and respond viscerally to whether it's a groove or like a tune or just something that they recognize that is comforting and healing to them, you know. When we were coming up in Denver and with this band, there wasn't a lot of folks doing this. There, in fact, you know, like, you know, writing swinging stuff and an acoustic quintet, you know, all original material, like the 80 or so clubs or 60 or so clubs that were going in the 80s were just like, you know, a lot of Great American Songbook, a lot of just head charts, a lot of, you know, singer duos and trios, and, you know, just playing tunes. And that's what we were all doing too. You know, we were all in the, you know,
Most of us was our livelihood. Yes.
Yeah. Like,
A
well,
lot.
Mark and Andy and I, you know, we're working every night, you know, sometimes 3 times a day, just, you know, playing in all these different bands, playing. I was playing a lot of trad, you know, like I was learning all those, all that stuff. And
I was playing a lot of rock and pop with different people. I remember
yeah,
Jill Sobule at the time. I was playing with her a lot. Wake Up Call was going on back then too, which is Eric's band.
Yeah. There was a lot of we were all involved in these other projects,
The
and
Ron
I
Miles Trio.
Ron had his yeah Ron yeah
Charlotte Bevan, you guys both. I
Charlotte.
know. I
yeah
know.
and Billy Tolles and Phil Urso. We were talking about all that before, and Ellen and Spike and
Cynthia, let's not
Richie
forget Cynthia, both of you
Rich
guys.
Charlucci, Cynthia Stahl. Yeah, man. All these
Yes.
and learning all these tunes, like that's really how I learned tunes, because there was so many gigs and it was happening so frequently that, like now we talk about having the luxury of getting the tunes emailed to you, and you can, print out your charts, and, while you're taping the parts, you can listen to the original versions, or if there's a recorded, all that stuff happens now is second nature. But back then, man, just to make you'd have to make a cassette tape and mail charts. There
You
was no
didn't.
like just clicking on the next one. Okay, I got this one. You'd have to fast forward to the next tune. Okay, what's going on with this? Is there an ending, or you'd have to get there. The process was a little bit different. Just to play new material and work on stuff. I mean, it was a lot more like if you wanted to do this, you had to do it in person, and you had to seek each other out. And I think, for the three of us as a rhythm section, we were all doing things on our own. Mark and I were doing more things probably together in different situations, like playing with Spike, and maybe like we'd be at the PEC with somebody for Tuesdays, Mondays and Tuesdays, or whatever they were doing. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, there was always that thing. Or
Right. Yeah.
we would
Remember the
have some
Sunday, Monday gig.
Yeah, there was a Sunday Monday gig where you watched where they had the Bronco game on, and you were playing under the TV, and everybody start clapping in the middle of the solo, but they were just clapping because there was a touchdown or a first down.
Humble gig. You played 4 hours in the afternoon, and you played
1 hour off and then another 4. Yeah, it was an 8-hour day.
But
Working man.
So we were playing a lot of what was presumed or perceived as what people wanted to hear, like when we were like working with other bands. And this was really as much
Freedom.
We wanted to see, like, I had no idea what we could do. This is like the first time where we just all in with 5 composers and playing each other's music, and that was what we were doing, and that's what we wanted to do, and we prayed that somebody liked it. I guess that was our approach with as far as the audience goes. I mean, I hope nobody hates it, like
I think some did.
I think also, I think musicians in general, like a lot of times they like being not liked. It was kind of like a thing back then, it's like, well, people hate us, and that's just exactly where we want to be, like,
Listen,
it's kind of angsty when you're younger,
I'm not saying this maybe is art or not, but there can, usually the success of a piece, of a novel, or of a painting, or of a poem, or of a movie, is that there are a whole bunch of people hate it and a whole bunch of people love it. Then this is a good something or other. And that is because people then can talk about it, and you have issues about it, about why you don't like it, instead of, oh yeah, well, yeah, it was pretty good. That's okay. It's not the same. So in a sense, we were doing a better job of with the audience than just entertaining them. A lot of musicians that we worked with.
I feel like
if you guys had been boycotted at some point, a mass boycott, then you would have been the biggest selling band in the country. That's the. But honestly, I was listening to a lot of Billy Harper, Charles Tolliver, Ornette, of course, during that period of time, and I worked with a lot of mainstream guys because I thought somehow doing that would sell records. But whenever I out in here, you guys were the only ones in town that were speaking like a language, as opposed to. Don't get me wrong, I love the Great American Songbook.
Spike, you love, of course, we know. I love them too. Yeah.
But I love listening to other stuff. I grew up on Lee Morgan, and I grew up on, you know, first jazz club I ever went into. I was listening to Don Patterson and Lee Morgan, so it was like, you know, back on when I was living on the East Coast, going to school. So when I came back here, there wasn't anything that was like that had that kind of power to it. There were a lot of great. I got to hear Julius Ellerby one night a long time ago, and that guy was playing amazing stuff. But strange guy.
Joe.
Yeah.
Joe Bonner.
Bonner, yeah.
Let's talk
Bonner,
about it.
I used to go to the Oxford Hotel, and he'd sit he was just sitting there, and people were buying him drinks to play tunes, and I could name anything to that guy, and he'd play the hell out of it.
Just great. Just great.
I gave him a piano once.
Yeah.
I asked him to sign a record. He signed it. Thanks for the piano.
Hey, listen, man, our senator loved him. So there you go. You know, Hickenlooper loved him. Absolutely loved him. So how about that?
This is so cool to hear, you know, the history, and you guys are all heroes in Denver, and it's so fun to just like, you know, hear about how having a band was such a unique thing, and the concept of having a band is such a thing. And it's yeah, you can tell you guys are a band when you listen to. You can tell it's not just 5 guys that came together for a session. It's like a band that's been working together.
Although it had been almost 20 years since we played before.
Yeah, right. But you know, that's the thing. It's, you never forget it when you're that kind of a unit, and you can hear it. I'd love to get last thoughts or last questions or anything you guys have.
Well, I want to hear more Andy Weyl compositions myself. I second Ron's. Every time I listen to this guy in whatever method, he just never. I'm a pianist. Well, okay, I play piano once in a while, and Andy's one of the guys that I listen to, and I'm always listening to the nuances and things like that. All these guys, though, are so special to me, and I love them all dearly. But whatever.
It was really cool that you could join us, Tom. I'm really glad you were here. Thank you it was great to hear your perspective and, you know, your contributions to this really cool conversation.
Well, thank you.
Is there anyone that has any questions that in amongst the hang? The hang is pretty solid. It's a good hang we got going here.
Yeah,
and I know a lot of these folks have been around as long as we have.
I got a quick question for you, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah,
Sure.
Hey, I teach with Keith, and so I get the pleasure of seeing sort of that side of his life. My question is this, man. I've pursued music in several ways in my life, but never sort of been able to achieve much accolade. Just been sort of having fun with things here and there. But what I would love to know is, like, do you guys even remember those moments when you were unfamiliar with your instrument? And if so, what is the thing that kept bringing you back to the thing?
You mean this morning?
Now hold on now.
There are days I still feel unfamiliar.
It's just like
that was kind of my point.
It's just a stare down, you know. It's like, oh. Sometimes you just look at it and it's just like, oh, yeah, I know I need to play it. Actually, I'm going to have to play it. You know, somebody's going to pay me to play it today, and I have to deal with this, you know. And some days are like that. After 50 years of playing it, but I think the initial thrill of playing and the initial feeling that you got, you know, when you finally played your instrument with other folks, and what that felt like, is and the sense of belonging in that community, and contributing, and nonverbal, and, you know, you don't have to, you just that is the thing that I always look forward to, that connection, that love of the you know, playing for somebody else. you know, playing for the sake of the music, playing for the sake of making it feel good and making everybody else feel good, and the love that goes, that's what makes me want to do it now. And I think that is what always made me want to do that. I remember when I first started playing in junior high, you know, and that was you know, I thought that was the coolest jazz band ever. And it was with Camila's dad. He was playing lead alto in that band. And man, I just go to those rehearsals at 7 a.m. with CJ, and it was transcendent, you know, like the rest of the day, like that's all you could think about. And I really feel like that spark is, for me, that's the one that I keep coming back to, you know, that love and the connection. That's what makes me want to play.
JJ, you were asking like, do we remember when we were unfamiliar?
Yeah, like, do you remember when you were in those early moments when you were still unfamiliar with the instrument, like getting good but still unfamiliar with it, and like what drove you back to it despite maybe your insecurity with it or your belief, you know, all that? What kept bringing you back to the instrument?
I know a little bit of why you're asking this, because we've talked. You're coming into the guitar now, right, as an adult. But I think it's a different thing when you're a kid and you're starting and you're in 3rd or 4th grade and they're teaching. I mean, it's all new to you and you're a kid and you don't even realize, I mean, you haven't even heard music. So there's nothing to judge yourself by. And they stick the thing in front of you and they say, this is a whole note and it's 4/4 time. It gets 4 beats and you squeak out a note for 4 beats. You don't ever really feel that, because it's a different thing when you're a kid, you know what I mean? So like, as you go along and the music gets more and more complex, I think there's always somewhat of a sense of competency, as opposed to like when you're taking it up later and you already know what music's supposed to sound like. That's when you asked that question, that's what came across my mind. It's a different bag when you're starting as a really young person.
That was a great question. I just want to really, really thank all of you guys, for all the Worms and Tom, for sharing all of these amazing stories. I hope everyone will check out the new album when it comes out. Is it March 19th? Is that right?
Yes.
Also, Paul's repping the old It's About the Hang shirt, and I've got the new It's About the Hang shirt. Yeah. And you can get these new ones on our website too. So if you want to be with the hang, get that shirt. But that's all I've got. And I just want to thank you guys again for being here.